public here. Okay. Welcome to New Realities. I'm Alan Steinfeld. I'm here with my regular crew of Roundtable discussants, and we are going to look at the UFO situation from a kind of overview, intellectual perspective. We were supposed to have a guest today. Roderick, what happened to our guest?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yes.
I got a message that she just wasn't feeling well today. You know, she does have things that she's deal with on a medical basis.
Right.
And but she wanted to, and she was really feeling really bad by not being here. So I think, you know, she should have called you as well. They're going to give you a call, but not that she doesn't want to reschedule and be here, which she does. I just think that, you know, what she deals with on the other side of the spectrum medically flares up and back and down, you know, and sometimes it gets overwhelming for her.
Right. So that's okay. I mean, I have Grant here. He's a huge resource of knowledge. And I really wanted Grant to meet Anjali. Right, Grant?
Saying I could fill airtime? Is that what you're saying?
No, you're
he's not saying that. He's not saying that.
No, you're not. You're at the center. There's nobody who has more of a sense of the moving parts than you, Grant. As we approach this thing, we just saw a little video from
That's
CNN.
when we do this, you know. He's playing it.
No,
he's
but really, that the thing that was interesting in the CNN Anderson Cooper interview with the pilot along with Favor was the woman. She says she's on Twitter, on UFO Twitter. She's become one of us, Grant. What do you make of that?
Yeah, they all seem to. I think it's good. And then the other thing is that apparently the government people are on there as well. This is sort of like a sounding board that they want people to put pressure on the government, and they've encouraged the government to come watch this big discussion. And that's my only drawback to it. It's being used as a pressure thing on the government to say, look, all these people, they want this, and they're demanding things and stuff like that. Where if they're going after the truth and they're going after what's actually going on, I'm all for it. But if again, we talked about this before the show started, if it comes down to this idea that we need money for new weapon programs and we're going to create a new enemy and the weapons of mass destruction and stuff like that, then I got a problem with it.
No, but that's what it's going to be, though, right, guys?
No, you know? I don't know. Elizondo has been converted, I think, to
in the background. We should talk about that. What Danny said. Yeah.
What did Danny say?
I had Danny on Sunday night. We had a 60 minutes UFO post-game show.
Explain who Danny Sheehan is, because he is a central figure for the last, I'd say, 30 years in the UFO world.
Okay, so Danny Sheehan his UFO interest came from working for the Carter administration. He worked for Marcia Smith, who was the head of science and technology at the Library of Congress. And she had been given a job by the White House, which is kind of weird because she's with
Jimmy Carter, right?
To do two different studies. One was on UFOs, one was on extraterrestrial intelligence. And they had brought Danny Sheehan in. He's got a PhD at Harvard in law, and he's also got a PhD in religion. So they had brought him in originally to do a lecture for JPL, the top 50 people in JPL, on the religious implications of the discovery of extraterrestrial intelligence. So Danny Sheehan goes in, and he says to Marcia Smith, well,
I just want to add one more thing to his credential. He's also a devout Catholic and part of the Jesuits.
Yeah.
Right. Go ahead.
He had defended the New York Times on the Pentagon Papers. He exposed Oliver North and the Iran-Contra. He shut down the American nuclear industry by defending Silkwood and basically shutting down the American, he worked with the Aboriginals, we call them Aboriginals in South Dakota, on the pipeline issue. He's been a lot of real high
and John Mack mentioned the thing with John Mack.
Yeah, that he defended John Mack, and he also was the legal counsel to the Steve Bassett at the Citizens Hearing.
Right.
So his interest came because he said that he wanted to be an astronaut, and that he had actually was going to go and was going to be an astronaut. He was interested in outer space and stuff like that. And then he ends up doing a law degree, and he finds out that he talks to a woman, and she says, "Oh, you're interested in being an astronaut? You should meet my friend Marcia Smith." And Marcia Smith was this woman doing 2 studies, one on extraterrestrial intelligence, one was on UFOs for President Carter as Carter came in. So he gets brought on the project to work for Marcia Smith. And he said, if I'm going to do this lecture on the religious implications of extraterrestrial life to the top 50 people at JPL, I need to see the Blue Book files. And she said, wow, we can't get the classified Blue Book files. No way. And he said, well, I need that. And then he said, suddenly he gets a call and they say, go to the Jefferson building, which is kind of interesting. It's in Washington. I've been there. And on the top, Jefferson was big into people cannot govern themselves without knowledge. Like, it's game over. And it's on the side of the building. As you walk in the front door, this famous expression by Jefferson about the fact that people need to know about what's going on in the government. So he goes and he tells the story that he goes to the basement and all these files are in there, all these microfilm readers and stuff like that. And he takes in a legal pad into the room. He's not supposed to have a legal pad. And then he's sitting there and he's looking through all his classified files and stuff like that. And he really doesn't see anything. So he says to the guy, I need to see some UFO stuff, some photographs. I haven't got much time. And so they show him, and he actually ends up seeing these photographs of this crash flying saucer in a snowbank. And he takes the legal pad, puts it underneath the microfiche reader, and he draws the symbols that are on the side of the craft. And he puts the symbols under his arm, and he goes walking off. And they say, "What do you weren't supposed to take that pad?" And they leaf through the pad, but they don't look at the back pad where he's got this symbol on. They let him go. So he starts telling the story. And even I went to Marcia Smith and said, this story, Danny Sheehan's, is this true that you're working on this thing? And Danny said, I talked to him once and I said, what was the conclusion? Was it classified? He said, I didn't see the classified markings, but I assume it was classified for the president. And they had all these UFO photographs, or not photographs, but drawings in the UFO. And that the extraterrestrial conclusion was they believed there was at least 6 extraterrestrial races visiting the Earth. This was in the official report to Jimmy Carter. So he starts talking about this, and Marcia Smith gets very angry that he suddenly, and as you saw the interview with Danny Sheehan, he said, well, I can't figure out why she gets so upset. I mean, people want to keep this secret. And he said to me, I mean, if I see something the same day, I go, hey, look what the hell I saw, man. This is so cool. He said, the one guy told me, remember that story? The one guy told me, he said, Danny, don't ever get a security clearance. Don't ever get a, you're a smart guy. You don't need a security clearance. You can figure out anything. And he said, they could give me an interview with a live alien, and I would never take a security clearance. And
right.
So
he had these symbols from one of the crashed retrievals that he copied. And then did that go anywhere? I mean, where did that happen?
Well, I asked him one time in San Francisco. He was at that big conference he used to hold in San Francisco. He was there and he was signing. And I said, have you still got those symbols? And he said, yeah, they're in my garage in these. I've never seen the symbols. They're in a file. He drew it for a guy in front of me. Danny drew the symbols on a piece of paper. And I'm thinking I should go and draw off that guy's thing. And I thought, I won't do it. And that was the closest I ever got to it. Danny drew them for somebody.
But I wonder if they match. I wonder if they match the symbols from Jesse Marcel and from Jim Pennison. Jesse Marcel from the crash retrieval at Roswell, and Jim Pennison from
to me, the ones that Danny drew were a little more complex. They're more like if you see people doing the alien writing, with the dots, the dots and the squiggles and stuff like that. It looked like that what Danny drew for this guy on this piece of paper.
Okay, Danny now is Lou Elizondo, the key central figure in the disclosure phenomena. So he's even more inside than Elizondo. I mean, so talk about where we are. What's all the moving parts that are going on now in this?
Okay, he's sort of the legal counsel for Lou and for Chris Mellon, and I think it's. But it sounds. I'm not 100% sure, but I think Lou came to him because Lou had filed a complaint with the Inspector General, and most people got to realize the Inspector General has ultimate power. The only person that can stop him, if you remember the Trump days, Trump was firing all these these inspector generals who were starting to do investigations. That's the only person that can stop an inspector general. So the Inspector General, Lou, I think, had filed a complaint that people were bad-mouthing him and they were trying to discredit him inside. And so he filed this complaint. And so Sheehan's going in to help him with this. And then these 2 new ones, when we interviewed Sheehan, he said there's not one, there's 3 of them now. So the one is this people trying to deep six Lou Elizondo. And the second one,
But wait, stop for one second. They actually denied Elizondo ever worked for the Pentagon. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, and Lou Elizondo got very upset. They're calling me a liar. They're calling me a liar. And then Danny Sheehan says, well, if that's the worst you got, no problem. I mean, what do you expect? They're going to call you a liar. Sure, they're going to call you a liar. And so he's already, that.
But is this going along with what you're saying always happens with government? They say yes, and then they say no. They give and they take, and it's like.
Well, that's the second one. That's the second one. One of the other complaints is, are they jerking around the inspector generals to find out, are they messing around with the ATIP files? Are they messing around with these statements? Why are they coming out with two different statements? So the inspector general can go in and he has ultimate power to subpoena people inside the Defense Department. And he says, okay, why did you put out this statement? Why did you put out that statement? And these people have to, like what they said is a GS-15. He's one of the highest level people inside the government, this inspector general. And nobody can walk around him. He can look at any files he wants and stuff like that. And so that's one of the complaints, is this whole deal where they're messing around. People aren't getting FOIAs. FOIA is legal. Why are you not doing this? You've been told to do this. You're not answering these FOIAs. That's one of the complaints. And the other one, the main one that I think he'd been brought in with Lou, was that Lou was upset that people were calling him a liar. And that was why they were trying to discredit him. And I even talked to somebody who said they were going to do an interview with some guy who had been in the DIA and bad-mouthing Lou. And I said to the guy, I said, you better not run that interview, because they're about to out these people. And you don't know if this stuff is true or not. And that's the whole deal, is why are these people bad-mouthing Lou Elizondo? If the Defense Department, if we're all one and we're all working together on the same team, how do you get to go and badmouth a fellow intelligence officer?
Right. So, okay. So they are now, Danny Sheehan is defending Lou, going, and when he makes this public to the inspector general, does that mean there's Senate hearings? What's the next step in that process?
Well, the inspector general will write a report. So there's actually, the way it works, according to what Danny said, is there's the inspector general, and then there's his lieutenants. There's like a sub inspector generals. So he's meeting with he met with the first one this morning at 9:00 in Washington, but they're doing it by Zoom. And then he's going to meet with the second one. All these three cases are being held by different people. So there's one lieutenant running one, second, third, and he's meeting with the first. And I said to him, because one of the people that was on the panel that we had said, the inspector general can walk around anything, man. It's a scam. People are molesting women in the military and they just sweep it under the carpet and stuff. So I said to Danny, because Danny's a pretty powerful guy. I said, hey, Danny, okay, you're with this inspector general. You know what's going on. Do you think you can keep the guy in line, or is he going to be able to walk around you? And Danny says, well, we'll have to meet with them first. I got to find out, what they are. But that's when he was sort of saying, I've never met a lawyer in the government I could trust. And so he's the guy that knows how all the pieces fit together. He's not going to be fooled by anybody. That's where he was even saying, if you watched, he was saying to Lou, do you think they told you what was going on? He said, yeah, I think so. And he said, they didn't tell you what's going on. You have no idea. There's all sorts of stuff that I know that you don't know. And he's sort of like, he's briefing Lou Elizondo on what's going on. And I think that's what some of the people on Twitter didn't like, was this idea that Danny is sort of speculating on stuff.
Oh, so Danny Sheehan is briefing the guy who was inside the Pentagon about Elizondo, the
Elizondo. They didn't tell you what's going on. You don't know what's going on. And remember he talked about that Mach 12 plane.
Talk about that. Who talked about the Mach 12 plane? Was it?
Sheehan had said, that Lou didn't know about this, that I knew about this plane. They showed me the photograph of this plane, goes at Mach 12, and it's got 100 nuclear tubes, and they can deliver 100 nuclear weapons to Russia in under 2 minutes. And it puts these tubes come up when it's at high speed, and it shoots this rare gas that goes and it explodes, and the explosions cause it to go faster and stuff like that. So Danny's talking about all this technology that he claims that he's been given access to, or he talked about the fact he's talking to the CIA guy, and the CIA guy's he's a CIA guy, and he's saying to Danny, yeah, we know about that, Roswell. And he said, you're actually making progress when you're talking to an active CIA guy. And he's actually just talking about it like it's everyday stuff. Oh yeah, Roswell, we had no problem with that. And he said, we're actually making progress on this thing. So I'm pretty optimistic with what Sheehan is there, because he knows what's going on. And it's like remember when Harvard went after John Mack, And John thought it was always just an investigation. Sheehan told him, quit talking, and I'm going to handle this. And then he took on Harvard University. Harvard was floored because Danny just said, okay, now we're going to have an investigation. We're going to bring up witnesses. And they go, what do you mean? We're going to bring up witnesses. And they ended up apologizing to John Mack. And that's the thing is, Danny can go in against these big organizations that think they can just walk over everybody. Nobody knows what's going on. Danny has been there since the 1970s, exposing this kind of corruption inside the government.
So what do you think, and everyone, Henrietta, Dave, jump in when you want, what do you think the end game, Elizondo, he's out there, he's put himself out in front. Chris Mellon's a sort of second behind. Elizondo's the front guy in the disclosure movement. What is his end game? What does he want? Why is he doing hundreds of interviews a week or whatever he's doing? I'm interested in what you think he's thinking. Or wants to happen.
Let other people. I'll say after I've got my opinion, but let other people jump in here as to what
anything.
They think.
David, you've been following the story.
Yeah, I'm interested actually to hear what Grant has to say. Lou actually, he just put up a website too where he's offering advisory services and is, offering consulting services as well and highlighting his media persona. So it's kind of interesting. He's got, it's like the not even a curriculum vitae. What would be what's the entertainer version of that, with their profile with their headshots and stuff.
So he's advising people about what on the website?
On his website, he's offering that as a service. So like you can call Lou and hire him to be an advisor for counter, like contractual agreements and stuff. He's offering himself as kind of like a for-hire guy. And then he's got his media stuff on the bottom of it where it's like I've appeared on these different shows and all that. So I'm curious to hear what Grant has to say, because when I saw that I was like, wait, where are we going with this? This is kind of a strange angle to take.
Speaking of strange angles, your light's very bright behind your head.
That's the Georgia sun is started.
Okay. That's the sun, the Georgia sun. Okay. And Henrietta, go ahead, jump in there for a second. Where we go? Go ahead. Yeah, make your sound a little louder. Make your sound a little louder.
Is this better?
Yeah, that's better. Yes.
Is it better?
Yes.
What I did.
That's fine.
Closer. What's he offering? When you say consulting, I don't understand what he would be consulting for. Elizondo, you said on his website.
He's consulting as his experience within the intelligence agencies, and it's basically like a corporate consultant. If you wanted to go up against, high level contract agreements and that, you might want a counterintelligence guy to come in and give you, how to operate in that field. But even like a mercenary I don't know. His website is very odd. It's an odd kind of,
but it's secondary to the whole UFO thing where I think what he wants, I'll tell you, Grant, that he wants the truth out, but only a little piece of it that people can handle. He said to people we can't go, maybe Whitley or somebody, he said, we can't go into the abduction thing. We can't go into all that. He's basically spearheading, framing it from the Nimitz on. I think how come no one ever mentions anything before 2004? It's like nothing ever happened. Suddenly you get this footage. It's sort of crazy. He does drop hints in some of these interviews. Yeah, we're coming 50 feet of this, he says to Stephen Greenstreet. And Stephen Greenstreet says, well, what did it look like within 50 feet of this object? He says, well, I can't tell you. My security clearance won't let me. But, I think he's basically a good guy trying to get some piece of truth, but a piece of truth is not the whole truth. And it's basically, I think they're treating us like children, Grant, and they say, well, you're not mature enough to hear the whole story. Only these really undeveloped, these unspiritual people in the military can, and they don't even get what's going on. I think that's also what we're going to find out, hopefully in June, that nobody knows what's really happening here. not the
Well-
government, certainly not the media, not the politicians. There may be some higher ups, and some people say, well, Eisenhower met with an ET and it's all been arranged. So I don't know. There's so many different moving parts. That did Eisenhower meet with an alien? Did they make a treaty to get technology for human genetics? I mean, that's
Well, and Alan, to your point too, I mean, about the going back to 2004 and stopping.
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
like to hear Grant's thoughts on that as well, because it is, I mean, they've within 5 years, maybe, well, I mean, like, so 2017, they've erased, they've erased like 100 years worth of history in the public mind in terms of the UFO subject. And there's so much else going on. I mean, Grant, you well know of all of the, you know, I mean, there's so much more. There's such a rich field that's been narrowed down to like this little tiny, you know, tech aspect of it. And it just doesn't touch on any of the, you know, kind of profound elements. And I know Whitley was talking about in one of his last podcasts, you know, I mean, the actual experiencers are getting like tossed out. I mean, even, I mean, Matthew Roberts, right? I mean, some of the people, or Kevin Day has had intense experiences that are, you know, go way beyond just tech in the skies, you know, and all of that just like erased.
So
know,
Grant, yeah, thanks, Steve, for joining us. Roderick's back with us. So Grant, we were up to you to put all the pieces together because you're the only one who's aware of all the moving parts and the history and an experiencer besides. So, I mean, take your best shot. Anyway.
Okay, I did a podcast about this where I say, you mentioned the thing about 2004 and Elizondo sort of cuts off past history. He'll just go to, that's when I was in ATIP. I can't talk about what happened before ATIP. I don't really have that material. We analyzed these cases, only military cases. We're not Title 10. We can't go after people on the street because we, you know, the disinformation thing, and we have to only deal with military people, and that makes sense. But what I said, people have to realize is there's nothing new under the sun, as the Bible says. And I point out that I wrote a book called Managing Magic. The date of that publication was February 2017. That was 8 months before Lou Elizondo came on the scene. That was 8 months before Mellon came on the scene. That was 8 months before Justice came on the scene. And I said in that book, I said, they are going to drop it. I was told in 2016, the following items that I was told. There are high-level officials that are going to out themselves. They're going to come out and they are going to say UFOs are real, and they are going to drop the disclosure thing. 2016. If you remember Hillary Clinton, May of 2016, she appears on the Kimmel Show. Remember the WikiLeaks thing with the dump, where she was going to go on in November of 2015, and she had this little speech all prepared, and she was really angry because she didn't get on Kimmel Show. I practiced this speech, and I didn't get on, so she didn't go on until May of 2016, and she sits in front of Kimmel. She says, you know, they're not called UFOs anymore. They're called UAPs. That's the new nomenclature. Now go back, look back and realize who knew they were called UAPs.
Wait, I just want to jump in there. She says, Kimmel says, well, I like UFOs. She goes, yeah, I like UFOs too. I mean, what's the difference? She was told to say that. She didn't come up with that on her own. Who told Hillary to officially announce UAPs to the public instead of who was behind the scenes there?
Okay, so what I was told back in 2016, and I say you got to go back, and Tom DeLonge is taking credit for this. If you go to Tom DeLonge's tweets, and he's right, he is the guy that's behind this whole thing. It starts in 2015. Tom DeLonge gets invited to a barbecue at Lockheed Skunk Works, to having a barbecue in the parking lot. Now, why would you bring in Tom DeLonge to introduce Robert Weiss, the head of Lockheed Skunk Works? And so he gets brought in there. And he says, well, I'd like to meet with the guy for 5 minutes and talk. And they take him to the skiff, the Lockheed skiff. And in the Lockheed skiff, they talk about consciousness. And and he gives them the little spiel. You guys aren't getting this thing out. You need to have me, because the young people don't understand you guys. You don't know how to tweet. You don't know how to do Instagram and stuff. And then the one guy says the keywords. He says, this may actually work. And he said, we'll let you know. And in 2 weeks, they give him the phone call, and he's told to meet outside the Pentagon. So they're all saying, "Oh, he made this thing." No, they gave him all this stuff. This is Bill Moore. This is the new Messiah from Bill Moore. Now it's Tom DeLonge. He meets with these guys in this building outside the Pentagon, and they say to him, things like this do not happen at the White House. Things like this do not happen on the Hill. They happen when people like us sitting at this table decide to take the football and move it down the field. And they send him to NASA, and he meets with NASA.
Wait. Who are those guys that are deciding? Who actually are those guys?
DeLonge identified them as intelligence people that he met with in this big room out in just by themselves. And they sat on one side of the table. He sat on the other side. They send him to NASA. NASA sends him to Ames. Ames sends him to McKay, the General McKay, and then they send him to McCaslin. So Robert Weiss gets on board, McCaslin gets on board, and so does McKay get on board. And what happens is they're ready to drop this thing. And if you take a look at the WikiLeaks, McCaslin actually writes an email as to what was going to happen when disclosure. You hand it off to NASA, and he has all this long memo about what to do when the disclosure thing happens. And then what happens? They leak the WikiLeaks emails, and these guys are all outed, and they got to go back in the closet again. So these guys all disappear. Hillary loses the election. So I contacted my sources when they lost the election. I said, "You told me they were going to drop this thing." And it was like Hillary was behind it. She had made a promise to John Podesta. John Podesta said Hillary promised she was going to go after it. And Hillary never brought it up on the campaign, but she answered the question 3 times. So she said, "Yes, I'm going after this. I'm going to open this thing up." And they said, "Well, Bill tried and he couldn't get anything." She said, "Well, I'm going to try again." So this was all planned under Hillary. And then she lost the election. The WikiLeaks, all the top guys were outed. They had to take the thing back under. So I went to my source. As soon as Hillary lost, I said, "Okay, is it over? They're not going to drop it?" He said, "No, the plan is still on. There's a lot of people involved. It's bigger than ever." So it took them till October of 2017. Then they bring Tom DeLonge brings all these guys. I named Semivan in that book in early 2017. Right. And if you take a look at Tom DeLonge's account, he said when he first put his first book out, identifying that he had these inside people, he gets contacted and he gets taken to a hotel room in San Diego, and there's 6 intelligence agents. Now, one of them, I guarantee you, was Jim Semivan, and they're going, like, "How do you know this stuff? Who are you talking to?" And then they join him. So they join him, and he gets all these people that are joining him, and they realize this is the way to move this thing out. Because what you got to remember is that a lot of these people, it's not really the government, it's people inside the government, like Jim Semivan, who may have had an experience with the beings in the room, guys who want this game out, and they know you got to move it, and they can move it out, and they have forces trying to stop them from bringing it out.
So they got it out. They did the December 17th, Leslie King, Ralph Blumenthal. Right.
But first, you got to remember. First, they do the October the 11th news conference. So I talked to Ron Pandolfi. I put a message through to Ron Pandolfi, and it comes back that afternoon, and he said, "I know all these guys. They've been Mellon's been in UFOs since the 1980s." He said, "I knew all these guys," and so they do that. But if you take a look, when you see the video thing, the videos that were leaked, and that was always the thing I said. People said, "Oh, they released them." No. How do you get the videos out? I don't care if they're classified, unclassified, even if they're unclassified. How do you get them over the wall? When you resign from the Department of Defense in disgust, they don't give you the videos as a goodbye present. Right. If you take a look at that stuff that leaked on Mellon's website, they have the handling case, and the woman, there was a woman, her name was, I never remember her name, but Exxon was her last name, or anyway, there's a name on there, and then Lou Elizondo's name and Mellon's name, and you see the 4 discs that have the videos on them. If you take a look at the date on that, it's September of 2017, the month before they went public with To the Stars announcement. So they had the videos already before they had the thing before, because Elizondo doesn't resign until October the 4th, the week before. So Lou had those videos before. And then they have the news conference. And then if you see when they go to the December 17th, what I say people always forget there is the fact that, or one more thing, when the interview took place, if you look at the December 18th New York Times article, so you have the 16th article, 2 days later, Blumenthal writes another article, and he talks about how Leslie went in to talk to Elizondo in wherever it was in Washington, got flown to Washington, and that she met with Lou Elizondo and a bunch of other former and present intelligence officers and a contractor. So it wasn't just Lou Elizondo in the room. Now we know Semivan was in the room, and we know Hal Puthoff was in the room. So this is the deal.
This is the package you're talking about that was either sneaked out of the Pentagon or
Rhonda her name is Rhonda Essex.
Right. And was this sneaked out? Was this given to Mellon? Was this?
Well, Mellon said it was given to him in the parking lot.
Right, but this is planned from the Pentagon itself to give Mellon these videos that then were released.
And you'll see it's the month before Tom DeLonge has his news conference. So they've already got the videos before Elizondo resigns. Elizondo does not resign until October. This is September. They've already got the videos out.
Are these videos? So you're saying basically it's all really planned by the Pentagon. This is not Elizondo acting on his own.
Well, I'm saying that I'm just guessing. I'm saying that Lou Elizondo is a representative of people that he may have been time to resign. Tom DeLonge says, I hired Lou Elizondo away. I got that on tape. He said, I hired Lou Elizondo away. So the idea was Lou Elizondo was frustrated. He left the Pentagon or whatever. Now you hear the stories that Lou Elizondo's been on. He put a Twitter posting out. I'm coming from Washington. So what's he doing in Washington? And then I heard that he'd been in a skiff. If he's been in a skiff in the last 6 weeks, then he's still working for somebody. A skiff is a sensitive compartmentalized information facility. So if they're going to give you a briefing,
he's still working for the Pentagon, and
that's a potential. Yeah, that's
he's a double agent, and he's like,
I don't know if it's a double agent, but there was a thing that was told about Jim Semivan when Jim Semivan left. The story I heard that Jim Semivan, when he had his experience and he had the beings in the room with his wife. And he goes in and he talks to Pandolfi and he says, I need to know what happened last night. Pandolfi says, you have a need to know. He said, I have a need to know. He's head of covert ops for the CIA. He said, you bring your boss's boss in here. Well, he doesn't have a need to know. And apparently they bring in the director and he says, leave it alone, Jim. This will ruin your career. Pretend it's a one-off. Don't get involved in this thing. It'll ruin your career. And what I was told is that when he retired in 2008, that's when he told him what was going on, which agrees with what Kit Green said to Dolan, that when you're in the government, you don't have a very high security clearance, but when you leave, then they give you the security clearance when you go to work for a contractor. So
one more thing. I want you to continue that, except now they've thrown DeLonge under the bus and Elizondo and Mellon are out there on their own. What happened to DeLonge? Did he just serve his function as getting it public and they dropped him?
Yeah, well, there's all sorts of stories about Lou losing money, and Sheehan's talking about the fact that they wanted to push the threat scenario, and that's when Sheehan said to Lou, "Well, you don't believe this stuff about the threat. Be careful it's not your message. Why are you putting the message out? If you're putting this out, you're going to get yourself in a box, and you can't get out of the box by talking about this threat thing." And he claims that they didn't believe it, that Mellon and Elizondo didn't believe the threat scenario, and that they left. But he talks about going into second gear. When it first happened, I said, did the Senate thing was, and I said that was tied into the Senate, that they'd gotten this thing through the Senate, and that was rolling. So the idea was to go to Tom DeLonge, then you go to the Senate, because Tom DeLonge's taking credit for all the Senate stuff. So you got the Senate, then we don't need DeLonge anymore. DeLonge's going to go make money on movies and stuff like that. And DeLonge made some stupid statements where he was always sort of like, I put the one where he talked about the threat, where he says, I just posted a couple days ago where, and this came off the Jimmy Church interview from 2016 with Tom DeLonge. He says, my military advisors, you know what they say when they look at each other? This is a perfect recipe for war. That's what they say. That's what Tom DeLonge said. And that's the whole thing, is that's the scenario, because Tom DeLonge hates grays. He's the way he had this impression about we should use nuclear weapons high in the atmosphere.
He's buying the evil alien thing. And as Elizondo said, well, the higher ups don't consider this a threat. Why would Tom DeLonge consider it a threat when he knows practically nothing? Yeah,
and they don't need Tom DeLonge anymore. They've got the Congress thing, and they're moving to Congress. That second gear is the Congress thing.
All right, we'll come back. No, I just wanted to comment by Steve. No, Grant, but stay with us.
Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully you can hear me. The Tom DeLonge angle, he's an entertainer. War and that sells, peace and consciousness doesn't. So Tom DeLonge is just a big false flag. He's an entertainer trying to sell product.
Well, I
I
think
don't
he's into the UFOs. He wanted it to come out, but
know.
there's
The
no
UFOs
use for
it's a
he,
marketing
he
opportunity.
well, I think he launched the To the Stars, and now these guys are the stars. Elizondo, Roderick, any comment from you
What I'm
about any?
curious about, Alan, is Peter Lavender. If we can go in that direction, I
Well,
think
he's a non-entity in a way right now, I think. But wait, Roderick, any comments about anything Grant has said?
No, you know what? I listened to all of it, and for me, it's one of those things. We spend so much time of saying there's a threat out there, but then on the other side, we're trying to spend so much money to get out there, right? And
That's
you get what I'm saying. It's like telling your
Mm.
kids don't go outside, the monster's there, but then you're going out the back door to feed it, and
Right.
so I think, with what we're seeing, of course, with me coming through the ranks of you guys and learning more and more and more,
Mm.
that rabbit hole is deep, and sometimes we can't really figure out what's going on. So, I've been hearing that Lou was thrown under the bus. Now, of course, I can hear the different theories but when you think about Tom DeLonge and people who I've just watched on TV, you know what I mean? And now as you get closer to it, it's like, what's really happening?
Well, that's what we're all trying to figure out. And Pandolfi, what is Pandolfi's relationship or feeling about Elizondo? Because Pandolfi has a lot of the keys. He runs the weird deaths for the government. So go ahead, Grant.
My concern, and maybe all of y'all can help me with this, is, there's things flying around. We don't know what it is. And we don't, and why we're not just saying, okay, there's things flying around, but
well, that's the bottom line. How come they're treating us like children? No, you're not allowed to hear the truth. It's like we're more grown up than these government people, maybe.
And it's almost to a point. The question is, what do we need to hear? It's like, okay, Lou has all this information. What difference does it make? I mean, other than what do we really need to know and hear?
We need to know everything from 1947 onward, no matter what happened. So go ahead, Grant. So what?
Okay, let me make a point on that. Why is the cover up? If I wrote a book called UFOs, Area 51 and Government Informants, and we dealt for 8 years with Dr. Eric Walker, who was the former president of Penn State University. He knew exactly what was going on. He was there when it started. He knew Vannevar Bush. He knew all the guys. We were pressuring. We said, "You're an old man. Come on, tell us what's going on." And he said to me, "Hey, this is just curiosity. Admit it. You're just curious. That's all it is." And then he said, "Why should we change the rules to satisfy your curiosity?" That's what he said. And the key is, so if you're a military guy, you got to remember it's not a unified government. It's these pieces that are fighting against it for budget and stuff. So you have the military guys who say, we're not going to release this because if we put our stuff on the table, we're going to give it to the Russians, the Chinese, and every other evil people. I mean, the Mexicans, and everyone's going to, go after it. So those people are playing their game. They're not going to put it on the table, and they don't care if you're curious. Or what Bush said to Carter, when Carter asked for the UFO files for the public, not for himself, he'd get the files, but for the public. Bush, who was Bush Sr., who's briefing him as the CIA director, said, curiosity is not sufficient need to know. And so curiosity, they don't care if anybody's curious. We're the military. We're going to build weapons out of this thing. We're not going to let the Russians get it. And the other one I keep reminding people of is this idea that you need a patent, that the guys who are at the leading edge of this thing realize, because the one patent that I heard that was gotten, the company sold for $100 million. And this was an invention the guy got in his head. He believed he got it from the beings. And the company was sold for, and I don't know how much the patent was the invention, but there's a lot of money in this whole deal. This is leading edge science. So you have the patent people, the people that are working on it aren't going to release it. The government's not going to release it.
What was the invention? Steve asked, what was that invention that sold for $100 million?
It had to do, it's in Diane Pasulka's book. It's Tyler D., who I talked to, and I remember him telling me about the invention. He said, Grant, I had that idea come in my head that morning when I woke up. The last thing I remember the night before was a hooded figure standing at the end of the bed. I said, really? Could you see its face? And he goes, no, I couldn't see its face. I said, you should go to Yvonne Smith. You go to LA all the time. You should be regressed. And he said, well, maybe I'll try to do that. I want to, because I said, you should find out what the being was talking to you about. So it was an invention that had to do with metal being put into joints, as I understand it, and it doesn't reject. It's like this whole thing. But he's got 40 patents that he got from the beings.
Well, if you read The Day After Roswell, Colonel Corso talks about all the reverse engineering, the microchip, everything that came out of the crash retrievals. But
Vallée discounts that. If you see the latest interview Vallée did on his Trinity book, he said no, that wasn't true. He knew all these guys. He talked about the guy that invented the microprocessor. He got in a dream, and Vallée knows the guy really well, and so he said like a lot of that stuff.
Why would Corso say that it was reverse engineered ET technology then? Actually, according to Linda Moulton Howe, she just did a program about Corso. Anyway,
well, they do. Vallée admits that they put that stuff into industry, but he talked about the one guy who got a piece of UFO or whatever, and Vallée talked to him like 20 years later or whatever, and he said, and the guy said, well, wasn't he still under security? He said, no, they didn't know what to do with it. They had it, and they had it for like 20 years. They couldn't figure out what to do with it. So there may be this back engine. Vallée claims that the metals, that they've gotten technology to the metals. You've been able to work something to the metals, but even John Alexander said that we know the history of the eye thing with the night vision stuff, and that's all sort of tracked. So I'm not sure that Corso stuff. Corso wanted, he was involved, but a lot of people said that he would add things to the stories and stuff like that, and wanted to take credit for all this kind of stuff. I'm not sure if I believe the back engineering Corso stuff.
Okay, Steve, what do you want to say, Steve? Yeah.
Robert Cray of the Cray supercomputers. So everybody remembers that pretty early supercomputer. Robert Cray was asked where he got his ideas for the computer, and he said, "I go into my basement. I have a tunnel. I dig in the tunnel, and I communicate with the elves, and they give me the information to build the supercomputer." And they said, "Oh, you're kidding me?" And Robert Cray said, "No, I'm not kidding. That's how I get my information." I'll just say that.
Wait, you muted yourself, Steve. Oh, but anyway.
Yeah, so the idea of extra human intelligences giving people technology is, centuries old.
Right.
Kekule.
No, of course. We think we even got writing from the gods and all agriculture in some mythologies.
I wrote a whole book. It's called Inspired. I wrote a whole book on this. The paranormal world of creativity. How many dreams came? I got 13 Nobel Prizes that came from 42% of all experiencers say at one point they have mathematical, scientific, or technical material in their head that they did not learn in school. The Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation actually had a board of physicists at one point who was looking at downloads that were given to experiencers to try to figure out whether there was some technology that could be. They've disassembled the board, but that's quite common. 42% of all experiencers have these downloads that they're getting.
But let's go back to the Elizondo question. What do you think he wants? If we can understand, like through Danny Sheehan, through those, Grant, where's he at ultimately? What does he want?
I think he honestly wants the thing out. I think it was the idea that when they met with him on October the 4th, 2017, there was a bunch of people in the room, and he was the guy. He was like the new Messiah. You're gonna retire, because it's always retired people. Whether it's the Bill Moore thing, it was a retired CIA counterintelligence officer. Jim Semivan didn't get involved till he was retired. They're all retired because they have this plausible deniability and they operate. So I think Elizondo is the front guy. He's a very popular guy. Everybody wants to talk to him in the media, and he's the guy that's carrying the water for this disclosure initiative. And I'm not sure who's exactly behind it, but when you hear about stories about being in a skiff or him being in Washington, or he when he reverts to his client, he says, "I can't talk about that because of my non-disclosure agreement. They'll throw me in jail." So then the question is, okay, so who are they? They have to know what the classified material is. So he has somebody above him that knows when he's on, and he'll say, I can't, and then he'll leak something out. He'll leak something out. And it's almost like he has to go back and, can I talk about this now? Then they say, go tell him this piece.
Well,
who
are they? Who are they? These are the people who've been in control since 47 and before. Who do you think these are?
I think they're interested people in the government that want it out. The people who are, Greer always used to talk about that there was this fight between the old guys and new guys, and they would have a vote. The MJ12s would have a vote as to whether to disclosure. And that at one point it suddenly went to there was more people voting for it than against it. So, but the way they do it is they have to release it with this gradual disclosure. You can't just drop it all because you lose control of the story. So it's like what Danny Sheehan talked about. It's called, he talks about Semi Van and Kit Green and all these guys. And he said it's like a limited hangout, like the Nixon thing. We'll give them some stuff, but they still don't know what's going on. We just leave out little bits and pieces. And that he calls it the limited hangout. You just throw it out there and see how people react. And people, you gradually move them from step to step to step. So I would say it's people that are interested. I don't think there's a direct policy. It may have been a policy because if you remember, they asked Barack Obama, did you go for the information? And he said, yes, I did. Was it withheld from you? No, it was not. It took a while to get, but yes. Well, what? I'm not talking about it. So it would something where you look the other way, where Barack Obama says to John Podesta, I can't do it, but go ahead with it. We have this program. Okay, go ahead. I acknowledge the program. Because if you remember, you go back to conversation that took place between Lawrence Rockefeller and Bill Clinton. This is a key thing. Rockefeller tried to get to the president. He couldn't get to the president because, as Ron Pandolfi says, the president cannot be a player. If the president goes down, everything goes down. So the president's not a player. So it's always like, well, the president's not involved. He doesn't know what's going on. He's a stupid guy. So what happened in the Rockefeller initiative was Rockefeller was going to the science advisor. That's as far as he could get. And then Hillary Clinton was the post office. So Hillary Clinton, and I could never figure, why is Hillary Clinton the post office? Everything that went from Lawrence to the advisor, from the advisor back to Lawrence, went through Hillary's office. I couldn't figure it out. And it said, I realized it's plausible deniability. Clinton can't be involved. So she goes to Bill at night and she says, Rockefeller wants this, Rockefeller wants that. This is the thing. Okay, do this. It's all plausible deniability. It's Hillary telling the president at nighttime what's going on. And Bill talked about that. So when Rockefeller tried to get the briefing and he could never get the briefing, he threatened this full page newspaper article and stuff, and they would try to appease him and stuff. So he finally gets Clinton at the ranch in August of 1995, and he does the briefing. If you heard the story, the briefing, Hillary shows up for the briefing, and it's not really a briefing because it's Rockefeller. It's not an official briefing. Bill was not involved. Again, the president cannot be involved. And as soon as it was over, the next morning, Hillary claimed to Rockefeller, and she said, okay, we've listened to your story. We've listened to your complaint, your story. Don't ever bring up the subject again. That same day, Bill Clinton was walking around the ranch with Lawrence Rockefeller, and he said to Lawrence, according to Whitley Strieber, he said to Lawrence, he said, you know this UFO thing? It's like the Arkansas tar baby story. Do you know that story? And everybody knows the story, the Arkansas tar baby. The tar baby's on the side of the street, and I can't remember the character's name. He goes by and he says hello, and the tar baby's just standing there and not doing anything. He gets mad, and he punches the tar baby, and he gets his hand stuck to the tar baby, and then he punches him with the other hand. His other hand's stuck, and then he uses his feet to try to get his hands off the tar baby, and he's completely stuck to the tar baby. And the more he fights, the more he gets stuck to the tar baby. And that's what Clinton said. It's like the tar baby. I can't touch the story. Wow. And that's the whole thing. So there's an approval coming from the president down through say John Podesta or somebody. They get the ball moving, and the president just looks the other way because he can't be a player in the game. So, but I say this has been going on forever. I mean, they did it with all sorts of people. Bill Moore, they did it with Emenegger in the 1970s. They've been dropping this limited hangout thing for many centuries, decades.
Henrietta, do you have a question there, Henrietta? You raised did you have something you wanted to say? Because, okay. So Grant, where do you think this is Elizondo says on the Stephen Greenstreet Part 2, we're going to get some big bombs dropped or big revelations happening in 30 days. He already said, let me just back it up. You know, the first question the guy from CBS asks Elizondo is, hey, is this thing real? And Elizondo says, come on, Bill, we're past that already. The government has acknowledged this is real. So what more can they tell us? They're not going to tell us people have been abducted. They're not going to, what are they going to say that they haven't said already? Do you think, Grant?
Well, they're going to show maybe these triangle videos, these latest ones where these pyramids are flying around. The photograph of the object coming out of the water near the submarine. You may get that kind of stuff. They're just going to say more and more, yeah, there have been a lot of reports. People can report this kind of stuff. They're going to open up and make a bigger emission. It's going to be another step. They're never going to make the big step and drop it all. This is a gradual disclosure initiative where they always have to keep control of the story.
Well, how come July 23rd, 2020, Eric Davis, New York Times reports Eric Davis briefing the Senate Intelligence Committee on crash retrievals? That's big. Oh, they have crash retrievals. And when do we get to have them rolled out and look at them? I mean, but they've already admitted there's crashes. The New York Times printed that. So, I mean, not that it's true if the New York Times printed it, but there's something else that they have that they could.
Yeah. Oh, they have they probably have 10,000 videos and all sorts of crafts and stuff. So they may release that. We have some material, but if it's classified, they're just going to drag it out. It's going to take a couple of years. I think they're going to get it. I think they've got the Lou Elizondo and these guys. They sound pretty confident. Like they say we're following a playbook. We're moving to this. It's all planned, and that's what I was told in 2016. Let me give you an example. In 2016, I was told they're going to put the big man on 60 Minutes. Guess what? They just did it. I was told that already, and it was going to be Jim Semivan that was going to go on TV and expose that I'm a high-level government guy. I had an experience, and this is for real. And then Lou Elizondo came on. Now Lou Elizondo's the new guy. But all this stuff has been done before. I mean, the 60 Minutes thing I was told, the thing that these high-level officials are going to come out and expose themselves, this all happened exactly why I said it in this book in 2017.
Right, but we're still dealing with the surface that there are craft here. Like my book, that you're part of, goes into like the experiencers. Are we ever going to get to the abductions, to the contact, to the genetic information? I mean, is that 100 years down the line in the disclosure outline? I mean, when is that coming out?
Well, you see, but you got to see now that it's the armed services and intelligence. So they're going to be sticking to the hardware. How does they fly? That sort of stuff. It's going to move because the pressure comes from the people. The government doesn't. It's like Stephen Greer was told by the one Republican congressman back in the 1990s. He said, "We can't touch this thing. You get it going, and we'll jump in and lead the parade." So they go like the politicians. They see, is this worth votes? Is this a popular issue? And what's going to happen with this opening is that a bunch of experiencers are going to come forward and they're going to start talking about the messages. And that's what Danny Sheehan. That's why I asked the question. I asked Danny Sheehan. So what is the message? And he said the message is very clear. The nukes, and this may be a big thing that they're going to drag back, is the nukes. They want the nukes turned off. This is a big thing because you're going to destroy not only this planet, but the oneness of the universe. It vibrates through the universe, and they want us to stop polluting the environment. So those issues are going to get a higher thing because now the experiencers and the people from below are no longer ridiculed. They're going to come and they're going to start putting pressure on the government to tell our story. Right now, it's the military. You got to remember, this is a military operation. Lou Elizondo, Mellon was military, and Semivan was intelligence. This is all this getting weapons and stuff like that. But it's going to allow other people, because the bottom line of why I think they can't really release a lot of this stuff is because they have not got a clue. They have not got a clue how consciousness works. They haven't got a clue how these things. In the Wilson leak document, which Valet talks about in his latest book, the Wilson leak document, at the very end of the document, it says, we have a craft. We think we can fly it. And what's that mean? It means it's got a craft and they can't turn it on because it needs a consciousness interface. And that's the whole deal, is those kind of issues are now going to swirl up, that it gives us the power, because it's all been acknowledged that this is all for real. Then you and I, exact question you and I are asking is, how about the abductions? How about the messages? How about the nukes? And then the pressure starts on there, and that will take a while to funnel up, and they're going to have to address that. But right now, they're not going to address it because we're not putting any pressure on that question. Right now, it's in the armed services and the intelligence committees.
Well, Steve, did you have something to say? Because I want to know how you think. Oh, go ahead, Steve. Go ahead.
Yeah. You know what, Grant, when you use the word control the story, and that brought to mind what Pasulka said. I dislike Pasulka intensely. I think it's a total scam. But what she said in the New York Times article, where she said the narrative grab.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important term. She grabs the narrative. I mean, she's saying that, I thought it was ironic she uses that term. So the narrative grab and this kind of, we were talking about words creating reality, let's say, so the more we put the words out there, the more we create a reality with them. And these narratives that people are creating, I believe, for profit, because it's either create or consume, or either creating, using the experience as a creative thing, or using the experience to make it a consumer product.
Mhm.
And I see so much of this as being a consumer product, creating churn to make product. And I'm just
What's
curious,
the
like,
product, Steve?
where does the magic angle come and cross the technology? If you can go into that a little bit.
Well, one thing I would say about that is you have to go back to look at how this thing all sort of unraveled. And that is that in World War II, we had 200 inventions that came from World War II. And Vannevar Bush, the guy that ran the UFO program, was in charge of them all. The atomic bomb, nylon, synthetic rubber, plastic explosives, jet engines. And so the way the America has turned, before World War II, scientists were like Max Planck and Niels Bohr and guys like that, where they were looking at the philosophical implications of quantum physics. And as soon as the war came, then it was like, whoa, we can make technology with this stuff. And as soon as the war was over, they realized there was a group called the Research and Development Board inside the military, and it was the weapons board. And they kept that together, that realized that this is how you could develop technology. So that's the way they see it, is that we're going to develop military technology with whatever we've got. We get all the leading edge stuff, and that this will all funnel into society. So they'll say, we take credit for the computer. That was ARPANET. The computer was ARPANET. It was a thing where they had all these modules where they have a computer here, a computer there. All the material was not in one computer. All the information, it was nowhere. That's why ARPANET was built, to stop the Russians from bombing the computer. And that became the internet. So that's the way they look at it. They say, in 100 years, you'll thank us for this. We've got it all covered up, but all this technology will spin off into the public. That's how it has worked since World War II, that most of the technology we've got has come from military development.
Wow. So this is the
Grant,
next.
can you talk about Maria Orsic? Maria Orsic.
Do you know about her, Grant?
The name's familiar. Remind me. The name's
okay. Well, Maria Orsic was the Nazi medium who channeled the information to create the bell.
The Vril, that was Vril, right, Steve?
No, the bell, the bell. The flying bell.
Oh, I thought they were part of the Vril.
Flying bell UFO.
Yeah, she was a Vril maiden.
Orsic was part of the Vril Society.
Yeah.
Yeah. And who was she?
Dave.
Wait, Dave, go ahead. Who was, what about?
I was saying Alan's right. And I think, Steve, you just said it. Yeah, she was a medium, but she was considered a Vril maiden.
What about that, Steve? So what? What are you saying?
She channeled the information to make the German UFOs.
Okay. So what about that?
So again, the magic and technology angle crossing. Maria Orsic was also involved with the Vril Society. And to speak of narratives, I go back to Bulwer Lytton, who coined the term Vril. And Bulwer Lytton being, I think, intersectional between politics, writing, and magic. He was best friends with Eliphas Levi.
Right, but I want to stick with the disclosure angle because I want to see what Grant's professional ideas are about. Okay, Elizondo said on national TV in front of 200 million people, UFOs are real. We're already beyond that. When do we get to the public hearing, sort of like what Stephen Bassett put together? Is that down the road, you think? Okay, people coming forward like yourself and, maybe even Whitley Strieber or Linda Moulton Howe and saying, okay, we've been studying this. When does that happen? What is the phase of rollout as you see? And let's say you were Pandolfi, how would you plan it out, rolling out?
Well, he may actually have planned it. You mentioned something before about what was his opinion, and what he says. And I used to think he was kind of crazy, but since day one, since Tom DeLonge's first news conference, he said the same thing every time. This is just another techno scam. He said, these guys, Putoff, Green, all these guys, they've been scamming people forever. And it's not so much a scam to me. It's like if you go and say, Alan, I got a cure to cancer. I've got it. And I've got to convince you I've got it, but I need $1 billion. So it's not so much like, so Hal thinks he can build this thing. He's got technology, but you need some money. So what Pandolfi said they had done is they'd run around and they went after billionaires, the way he described it. They went after billionaires who would rather put their money in some crazy idea than pay their damn taxes. And so then they ran out of billionaires. They went after the Church's chicken guy. He was a billionaire. They went after him. They went after Bombardier. They went after Joe Firmage and all these guys with lots of money. And now they're running out of billionaires. And now they've gone to the government to get money from the government because the government's got a $735 billion defense budget. So whatever you think about Pandolfi, he has said the same thing all the way through since that first news conference by Tom DeLonge. This is a techno scam. Give your head a shake. And what he's basically saying is there is no technology, that they're just pretending they've got on the edge of technology. And he keeps hinting at this thing with the portal, that the portal is the actual stuff that somebody may have.
Oh yeah,
so
that's interesting. I want you to maybe go on Roderick's Clubhouse one day and talk about what's behind the whole UFO thing, which is the portal technology. This is what Grant always comes back to. It comes down to this, I guess, interdimensional possibilities, right, Grant?
Yeah, because if you take a look at Joe Firmage, and we know Joe Firmage for sure, because the guy that was in Skinwalker, their own Skinwalker Ranch now, Brandon Fugel, he was at this one big test. There's a test that's online that shows they have this thing that Firmage has spent millions and millions and millions of dollars. And the question is, so if he's got all this money and he's got intelligence connections, he told me he had intelligence connections, he's got Ron Pandolfi as a friend, like why would you not go buy your technology from the government? If they've got anti-gravity technology, why would you do it? So he's got this thing with these gyros, and these gyros are flipping around, and they got the test, and you can see Hal Puthoff there, and you can see Brandon Fugel in the picture, and they've got a hook on this thing, and they're doing the same thing the Canadians did in the 1950s. They're weighing this thing, and they're spinning these gyros, and the weight will go down by 1 or 2% or something. It's a gravity control experiment. But and the whole idea is, if they can't levitate this thing 1 inch off the table, you're telling me they got UFOs that the government is flying around? Firmage had a lot of money. He had all sorts of government connections. If they had it, him and Bigelow would not have pulled out. Why did Bigelow pull out? Because he basically understood that there was no money to be made. This thing is way beyond us. And that's what you see over and over again, is so far beyond us that there's no way we're going to do it. And they're just trying to get some money because
Grant.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve. Go ahead, Steve.
My friend Creon Levitt, who was a NASA scientist of 30 years, was the lead scientist behind Firmage's initiative behind 0 point energy. Creon traveled the world with Firmage and looked and did tests for 0 point energy, and none of it came out. The last one that came out was the one from Ireland. I'm forgetting the name of it, and that turned out to be a big fraud too. But Creon now does satellite technology, but he was Firmage's chief scientist.
All right.
Yeah, that's the key is if guys like that haven't got it, they ain't got it. No matter what people are telling you, what kind of technology they got, that they don't have, because you see it over and over again. Or if Valet says, they asked him, do you think they got the technology? He said, if they had the technology, they wouldn't still be building rockets. I mean, you got to take a look at it. So this is what it is. It's trying to move it into the white world, because the problem they've got, and this may be part of what guys and like Puthoff and Elizondo and all these guys that were in the government are frustrated who want to put it out, was this the idea of stovepiping, that if you, and Valet talks about this, so if you get a piece of a UFO, then they give Alan the door, they give Steve the the council and stuff, and everybody's got it, and they don't know where it's coming from, and none of us guys are talking to each other, and the whole thing breaks up because it's got the stovepiping. If you get it into the white world, there's no more stovepiping, and people can talk to each other and solve the problem.
Well, that's why what you just said, Grant, is why I don't buy Richard Dolan, great guy, great historian, his whole breakaway civilization idea and the whole Mars, colonies that the guy in Israel said. It doesn't make sense that exists, that they're sending people to. I mean, I don't see any evidence from that. It's nice to talk about there's a breakaway civilization scouting the solar system with trade. It just doesn't make sense with what I've talked with people, right?
And what happens there, I'll give you an example there to show you this idea of the consciousness thing. I had this meeting with Tyler D. from the famous Diane Pasulka's book, American Cosmos. He's the NASA guy that's in this room. They have this thing beside it, and he's got all these patents, and he sits talks to the beings. He has this contact modality where he sits with a glass of water in the sun, and he drinks it, and he he gets these inventions and stuff like that. I had a meeting with him in 2013 in a cabin in Pennsylvania, and he had his cell phone. That's another story. He shows me a cell phone. He says, "Wait, look at this." And there's this painting of these guys, and they're flying through space, and it looks like they got pajamas on, and one guy looks older and one guy looks younger, and they're flying. He says, "What do you think of this?" And I looked at it, I go, "I don't know." And then he shows me a photograph of some paintings of an eclipse taking place, like 3 different paintings as the eclipse takes place. Then he shows me this picture of a painting with these balls, big balls going into these small balls. He says, "What do you think of that?" He said, "I don't know. I have no idea why you're showing me these things." He said, "You know where that is?" I said, "No." And then, first he said, then he showed me this thing on top of a parkade. He shows me this 56 or 57 Chev on top of a parkade. He says, "Look in the back seat. There's a postcard in the back seat. It was there when I was there. You know what it says?" And it talked about this guy with his girlfriend. "I wish I could travel across time and space to be with you." I said, "That's what it said?" He said, "Yeah, that's what the postcard said." So then he says, "You know where this is?" I says, I don't know." He says, "It's the Hughes Aircraft Building in LA. And I go, "Still don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea." He says, "You know what was there?" And I said, "What?" He said, "The jump room." I said, "Let me see those photographs again." And he shows me these.
But how do you know he wasn't that? Is there really a jump room? Come on, Graham.
Okay. Well, I wouldn't have believed it. But the question is, this is the top
Paintings
guy.
and postcards, Grant. Paintings and postcards. And that's
Okay,
what's
but
going on.
let him finish.
Paintings
Hang
and
on.
postcards.
Let him
Hang on.
finish, Steve.
Let me finish. So the question is, and he said, "You know where the painting is? The painting with the guys flying through space?" Which doesn't make any sense. And then when he tells you what it is, you go, "Oh, that's," and he said, it's outside the elevator. And so then it takes me 2 years. And suddenly I'm thinking to myself, why would he show me those photographs? Why would he go to the building? If this is all garbage, what is this top NASA guy doing in the Hughes Aircraft Building taking photographs? And he said to me, when you go there, watch out for the security guard. There's a security guard. And when I went there, first time I got to LAX, man, I was on a bus, man. It's 999 Sepulveda Avenue. Anybody can go there and look. These paintings are still there. And I actually went to Andy Basagio. And I said, "Were you in the front building or the back building?" Because there's 2 buildings. He said, "I don't remember if I was in the front building or back building." But the whole thing was, why would he show me these photographs? And he didn't say it was real. He didn't say it wasn't real. He just said, "Hey, what do you think of these photographs?" And I had no clue.
But I don't believe anything Andrew Basagio says.
I wouldn't have believed it either. But if a top guy from NASA, who is one of the top guys in this field in the black world, comes to you and shows you photographs, then you got to wonder, why is he showing me these photographs? Why did he go to that building? If this is total nonsense, surely to God he would know that.
Well,
Grant,
maybe
how familiar are you with NASA, Grant?
Maybe.
What do you mean how familiar? I know the one guy inside NASA, and I know some of the stories that have been told, and Chris Bledsoe being there and all what happened there, and they're watching him.
So it's all secondhand. Okay.
But no, Grant, I don't, do you really think there is, because you're an intelligent guy, you've been around, you've since 75, you've been looking, is there, in your opinion, a jump room to Mars or not?
I absolutely wouldn't have believed it until he showed me those photographs. And it goes, but it fits in to the whole idea. It's so when when Peniston is talking to Kit Green, and he says to you, "What the heck are you doing here? What are you bugging me for? What do you want my DNA for? My fMRI?" And he said, "Oh, it's about propulsion." He said, "Come on, I'm not stupid, Green. It's not about propulsion. Tell me, what's this really about?" And he said, "We're trying to figure out how they travel interdimensionally. We're trying to figure out how do they pop in and pop out just as quickly. The whole jump room thing is the portal. It's connected to the portal thing. And this is the whole key, is whenever I look at anti-gravity stuff, whether it's the Canadian work that was done, all these with Firmage's stuff, it all ends up in a dead road. But every time I look to the portals and I go to the end, it seems to be indicating that yes, they do have some technology of portals. At Contact in the Desert, I'm giving an entire lecture just on portals, on all the stuff that I was told about the actuators.
How do the portals operate, in your opinion?
Yeah,
Well, it depends what it depends what you're looking at, because if you're looking at the Mission Rama Zendra thing, there they talk about this blue light that comes off the ground, how they raise their vibration and the beings lower their vibration, and these Zendras open. They've been open piles and piles of times. I interviewed 10 witnesses. I interviewed the one from 2020. I may have told that story on it before. just happened last year, where they opened this thing, and these people didn't even know they were in a portal Zendra. They were there. They were 9 people, 2 o'clock in the morning. This Adama alien said he was going to appear, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, suddenly the one woman, she's an intuitive from Mexico City, said, they're here. And the other people said, how do you know that? I could just feel it. And everybody says the same thing. When you vibrated with them, you know they're there. Chris Bledsoe says that all the time. I know when they're here. And everybody's going, well, I don't see anything. And then suddenly the light appears in the forest, this bluish white light, and this beam comes up. And then they say, come. She gets the intuitive message, come to the forest. They've opened this Zendra, and people will describe, and I've got a 747 airline pilot who's been in one of these things, and they talk about the fact that when you're in it, your voice sounds like you're underwater. So these people start talking about the fact that they were talking and their voice was like they're underwater, which means they're inside a Zendra. And
So
they
the
say
portal is metaphysical.
Hang
on. Let me finish.
Wait,
'Cause
okay.
I'm
But
just
before
telling
you
you this-
finish, I just want to say, Roderick, I know you have to go. Thanks for being here. Let's have Grant, if he's willing, on the clubhouse at some point, okay? Is that good? Unmute yourself. Unmute.
Yep,
Unmute.
definitely. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, he's full of information. I think it's important to get him there. So,
Yeah,
okay.
Grant would love to have you on Clubhouse and let you go after it, because you got a lot of things to share. So hopefully you allow Alan to connect us.
Okay, I will. Okay, go ahead, Grant. Thanks,
You guys.
thanks,
so
Rod.
this is metaphysical. The one lecture I'm going to give is not the thing, because I've had lots of people say, oh, I got a portal in my kitchen. I got a portal in my backyard. That's not the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. I'm talking about, does the government have this technology? So there was actually, and it's on my White House UFO YouTube channel, I grabbed a video that was done by Aliyah Pandolfi. Ron Pandolfi's wife had a 2-hour portal conversation where she's talking about this. At one point they're talking, and I knew about these stories, that they had these actuators. So this is like a real thing, like this actuators. And this guy whose name is John Sillison. It's kind of a long story. John Sillison goes, they're in Costa Rica. John Sillison comes there to get this actuator out of a portal. He gets the actuator. And on this thing, she's saying, what about these actuators, John? Are they mythical? Are they or did we create them? And he said, no. And he's basically saying, no, we did not create these things. These things come. And the whole story was that they had this in the desert, 2016, and Ron on camera, and I've got it, I've shown it a number of times. Ron on camera going through the Panama Canal on a cruise ship. Doesn't realize I'm going to grab this tape from his wife's YouTube channel. He says, people have always wondered what it's like to go into the next world. The next time John, his friend that he went to university with, next time John goes to the desert, a number of us here are going to go into the next world and come back again. And I remember Maccabee was floored when he saw that. Ron on camera talking about this, which indicates to me they have some sort of technology. They understand some sort of implications, but the Zendra thing is completely different. That's where they open it up. It's done through vibration. It's like an interdimensional bubble. And I've talked to 12 or 15 people who have been in these things, and there's no doubt they're in these interdimensional things, and there's beings in the bubble. So
but have you ever been in one, Grant? Have you ever been in?
No.
Right. Well, David, you've studied a lot of the kind of ancient technologies. I think where does your research fit into what the whole portal dimensional doorway thing is?
I think it's interesting because one of the things Michael Grosso was talking about, the levitating saints, right?
Yeah.
And location goes along with levitation. So there is, there's quite a history of this kind of thing, not necessarily with the technology, unless you consider, a mental technology or kind of a state of being that allows that sort of thing. So, with the Zendras and that the Ramtha group is doing a form of meditation that is familiar around the world. I mean, you have, even in African traditions, right? You have levitation, you have bilocation. So it's a fairly common, ability that is spoken about.
Well,
and
so
let me make one point on that, because Tyler D, if you know the story, a guy out of Philadelphia financed Diane Pasulka and Tyler D to go to the Vatican Library. Pasulka was interested in this monk or whatever that had bilocated or whatever. Tyler D was interested in the levitating monks because it's technology. He's looking at all the files on the levitating monks, because that's the whole deal. They're trying to use that, and that's what we've got to do, is not so sort of question it and say, oh, this guy's true, this guy's not true, is to look at it and say, you know, if this is true, let's go look at the records. Does it tell anything about how this thing works? Because you can say, no, nobody can levitate, this is all garbage, you know, I don't believe that. But then you lose the whole deal. Tyler at least realized that there was probably some truth to this. Let's go look at the files. And there's something about the glow on the guy's face, or this, we go to the theory, the ecstasy, which is almost the same thing as the Mission Rama thing. When they open the portal, is you create this vibration by doing this mantra thing. And for hours and hours and hours and hours, you raise the vibration and then you pop through. But they're using like the levitating monks were always a state of ecstasy. They got a spiritual ecstasy, and the guy would start to levitate. So you start to learn things from these anomalies, and that's the whole point, is the anomaly tells you something in our worldview isn't right. And if you can solve the anomaly, you're going to create new technology. So that's where Tyler D and all these guys are coming from, is to look at the anomalies and try to figure out, is there something we can learn from it?
But we're really far then from, we're at the beginning of a long new history to humanity. We are at the threshold in a sense. So is this 100 years till we get public acknowledgement of portal technologies? Or?
Well, I think one interesting to think about, though, is that we're all hyper connected now.
Yeah.
Right. So if you think about the progress that happened with technology over the past 100 years, you know, in the idea of I mean, like Steve pointed out, right? Like Cray's down in his basement talking to elves and builds a supercomputer. The Palomar telescope was built by a guy who said that he talked to elves. The Xerox machine, elves, right? So there's this long history. You can keep going on and on and on with this technology. Isaac Benthoff, the heart catheter, that was built using meditation modalities. Marcel Vogel invented the adhesive, the hard drives, using visions that he had from, you know, a near-death experience and communication with light beings. So, you know, as we get hyper-connected, I think, you know, we start to see a lot more synchronicities, a lot more of these kind of downloads and communications. So I think that it'll amp up. And the other thing too is that you look at, you know, so there's this government disclosure, and I think we kind of talked about this last week too, with some of the documents and all that Neil had gathered was, you know, okay, well, that's all well and good, but at the end of the day, there's a third party here, right? Like, or there's this other form of consciousness which is communicating to the human level, and that's going to happen whether or not the government wants it to, or a scientist or a billionaire or whoever, right? So we have that. And there's stuff like the Randonaut stuff, right? So there's open source technology now where people can access, you know, these random experiences that are being driven by who knows what, you know, I mean, some sort of, you know, randomized field where they're having these experiences, which then increase the downloads as well. I mean, I've had crazy experiences, not even using the Randonaut stuff, but just having it activated and like weird.
What's the random house stuff you're saying?
The Randonaut? The Randonaut technology?
Randonaut.
Yeah, that was something that Arcturus Roth had mentioned. It's an app on your phone, and it's a geocaching app that connects to a random event generator.
Right.
So you know, the whole point of the Randonaut thing is that you project an intention and you turn the app on, and then it'll give you a point on your GPS that you go to, and people are finding that, you know, you think of a bear, right? And then you go to this location it tells you to go to, and there's a shopping cart that has a stuffed bear in it, abandoned in a field or something.
Right.
You know, and it's freaking out. They've got 200 million users now, or more than that. That was kind of like really broke out.
Narrative grab, Dave.
No, I know the developer.
Grant, I just have to
no,
tell
I
you.
know.
Okay. Let's
Steve,
not get
I know
into it. But no, go ahead. Go ahead, Dave. Go ahead, Dave.
Dave, Grant,
No.
Oh, God, Dave. Sorry. Dave.
No, go. Yeah, let Dave, and then Henrietta. Go ahead, Dave.
Oh, I was just gonna say with Steve, with the narrative grab, like I know the developer, like personally, so I know they're not just messing around with like, you know,
It's
I mean,
not all money,
Well, if you know
Steve.
the developer, explain the developer's thoughts
No,
on synchronicity.
We don't have to get. Let's just Henrietta. Come on in, Henrietta. What did you have to say?
Okay.
And
Actually, I was interested in what Steve was asking Dave about the app, like why you were, questioning it, or it's, the creator's sort of pure intention, if you like, rather than your
well,
whatever.
okay. I also want to
just
get back to
curious.
Grant, because Grant's underlying message in the couple of years I've known him is that it's all consciousness. And are we at the threshold of really understanding how to use consciousness in ways that maybe these ETs know how to manipulate craft and create a quantum field? Is that the threshold we're at now, you think, Grant?
I think it's moving pretty fast. All you have to do, you've been in it a long time, I've been in it a long time. If you just take a look at what has happened since December of 2017 till now, it's a completely different world. This thing is moving at high speed. And I pointed out, like, people always forget the people you saw, the good guys and the bad guys. You drag this religious stuff into it. There's just guys. And you take a look at the majority of these guys are experiencers. So Jim Van's an experiencer. Gary Nolan talks about, he's one of the key guys. He talks about, I don't know how it works, but I know how to make it work. And he says, you go through all the problems and you write it down on a piece of paper, you put it beside the bed, and I wake up in the morning, he says, and it's either in my head the next day or a couple of days later. It answers the question. So he says, I don't know how this thing works, but everybody's starting to learn that. Tyler D has this thing. He's got 40 inventions. He said, I go to sleep for 8 hours and I never drink, I never smoke, and I don't drink coffee, and I get up after 8 hours, and then I go back to bed for an hour. That's critically important. He says, go back to bed for an hour. Then I get a big tall glass of water, and I go sit in the Florida sun on the deck, and I start to drink the water, and the beings start to talk to me. So we're starting to get to the point where this is going to accelerate, and that's the key, is the idea that with this, there's this mental aspect that or Semivan says, he was asked, who's running the show? Meaning like the government. And he said, they're running the show. We always got to keep in mind that the disclosure is going to come up to the beings, because we don't understand the consciousness thing, and they're downloading stuff into people. They're moving the disclosure, almost like the Tic Tac. I posted just a couple days ago on Facebook, the Tic Tac thing with the female pilot. She's talking about, she's up there and she looks down at this thing, and they described it like a ping pong ball bouncing around on the bottom, like a bee or an insect inside a bottle. Go,
Right.
I saw that in 1975. We called it the bouncing ping pong ball. And so to me, it's the whole thing where what is this? This is a pre-abduction maneuver where they're bouncing around the thing, and they got the water all bubbling up. I say, like, they're sitting there a week before the Nimitz comes, and they're going, here we are, take a look at us. And it's the whole theory of wow thing. And then they finally get their attention. They say, Zogar, turn the lights on higher. They can't see us. And then finally they come. Here comes the F-18s. And then they say, Zogar, go under the water, make some big bubbles. Make some big bubbles, they're coming. And he goes under the water, and all the bubbles and the things bouncing around. And these pilots are going, oh my God, what's going on? And they tell that story, and they tell the story. And everybody repeats the story about the thing that dropped from 80,000 feet down to sea level in 7/8 of a second, which is like 15 and a half miles. And so the whole thing is these bizarre stories that this paranormal phenomenon is doing, these bizarre things and getting people to think. And the more we talk about it, the more we get closer to that consciousness thing. And people like you and I are going to put the consciousness thing. And once we put enough pressure on, the same as they put pressure for the military, we put the pressure on about the consciousness thing, then somebody's got to go there on consciousness, and then it'll develop, because we've got the internet, which makes things go at a tremendous speed now.
What do you also think that, like you say, the beings are in control of the phenomena? They seem to be increasing. Sightings seem to be increasing. Cheryl Costa's book reports about, those are just reported sightings. I think there's probably at least 50 times more unreported sightings than there. So there's something on the part of the phenomena that people inside the government may be privy to, the beings are saying to the government, either you tell them what's going on, or we're just going to show up unannounced. So do you think that could be going on here, Grant?
Or they're triggering people inside the government. You see all these high level government people who end up being experiencers. I just did a posting about Hal Puthoff. Hal Puthoff talking about this fact that in a couple of months after the Phoenix light sighting, his 20-year-old son had a major, huge triangle sighting driving through Phoenix. And then Hal said, it's so weird how this works. I picked up the Adamski book in the 1950s, and I went down the rabbit hole. It's like it fell into his lap, and he said, "Yeah, it drove me to this thing, even though I realized it was total garbage." He gives that the thing where it flipped him down the rabbit hole, and that's the thing is you start looking at these synchronicities. Is this all accidental? That you see what, like in 75, you would never have seen any of this. There's no delayed, there was no time, there was no grays, there was nothing of this stuff. Now we got light language people, we got these people with the orbs and the beams of light, and people talking about experiences, and high level government people coming forward. It's accelerating at an incredible rate.
Well,
if you just
and
take
like
a look at the last 3 years.
What's that,
Like
Steve?
Dave said, what's important about the acceleration, it's obvious, but the fact that we have this information zipping so fast around that what took, I just need to read a definition of ecstasy, Grant. Mentioning ecstasy, the definition is a displacement of mind.
Mhm.
All
There
right,
you go.
a displacement of the mind.
But you know,
You
yeah,
know,
but
and
I
also ecstasy is bewilderment,
mm,
and the surrealists talked about sensory bewilderment, which now
right.
you have this confirmation resonance where people start seeing it, and it adds up, and it builds up into more and more people willing to have the experience.
Well, and I also
They're
think,
willing to
Grant,
have-
I think it's going to go to another level of complexity that we can't predict at this moment. We're building towards an unknown apocalyptic, in a good way, point where something's going to come together. This is just my feeling that we had yet to see from this perspective now. It always seems to unfold that way. Like when, you know, the living organisms were being suffocated by oxygen, by all which was a poisonous gas, until like there was this rearrangement of biology. There's suddenly oxygen breathing organisms. So I think we're seeing this coming to a crisis, like a pimple that's about to burst. And here we are. What do you think?
One of the problems that we have is we're in Western society and we want everything yesterday. And we want the end. Like, when are you going to tell me my story of ETs, exactly what I think is going on? And I always go back to what David Bohm had said about, he was talking to the scientists about the quantum physics. He said, you know, when we discover all the quantum physics stuff and figure out how this stuff works, there's just another level below that. And they said, no, there's not. And that's what I think. It gets more complex. When we always think we're on the very edge, when in reality, it's all a game. All the world's a stage. All the men and women are but actors. And we have this play, and it goes on forever, and it gets more and more complex. The universe gets more elaborate, more complex, and we just keep building it and building it. And like, we just stage play this thing. I don't think there's ever an end to this thing. It's just that we're in this Western mentality where we want something. It's like, I call it like capitalist spiritualism. We've got the 2 cars and the big house, and the kids are in college and stuff, and now we need something else. So let's find out about UFOs, and that's the problem that I think that we face, is that a lot of people want to go out and do sky watches because they want to see something, and it's like, well, where's this getting us? You gotta get beyond just sort of entertainment. And what's the message? Why are the beings here? Why did this start? Why did this all start in 1947? Well, why are we engaging with this thing? And that's where we sort of miss the experiencer thing. But the experiencers it's like like every other social and political movement. Your kid may have cancer. It doesn't mean that the world has to shut down to cure your kid from cancer. If it's important to us to get the consciousness message, if we believe that's important to the world, the onus is on us to put the pressure on, the same way as Elizondo and Mellon and these guys have done here, to move the ball down the field. We can't wait for Big Brother government to do it for us.
But there are these
Grant,
oh, go ahead, Steve. Go ahead.
I'm going to go, Dave. There's the great game, and you mentioned game. There's the great game, and there's great work. The great game, political, move it around, technology. Great game is create soul, creating finer souls. When Alan spoke about the dissolution in the pimple, the thing that came to mind to me was the old axiom: dissolve and coagulate. We're dissolving we're dissolving this consensual hallucination, and we're coagulating.
Right.
Well, that's what Grant's saying. But I think there have been quantum leaps within Western civilization. I mean, yes, the discovery of the New World, it wasn't good for the Native Americans, of course, but that was a quantum leap. The Renaissance, the combustion engine, of course, it had its downfalls. And there's been I mean, most of the world is a lot better off now than they were 100 years ago. I mean, there's less wars, there's more, but it's not perfect. There's still a lot of problems, but there is an evolution. So I say, let's say all the evidence is out. Let's say all the UFOs is known. Let's say all the secrets are revealed. Then what? Then we're here to be creative beings. That's my end game there. That's what we're here to live, the joy of incarnation. That's where I think it's all going, Grant.
Yeah, I'm not sure you're going to see as much as people think they're going to see, because basically what you've got now is, what have we actually learned? We think we've learned a lot. They briefed the Senate Intelligence Committee and the Armed Services Committee. What did they tell them? Oh, we can't talk about that. So it's just the same story. It's just at a different level. They're telling you that they're covering it up. And Lou Elizondo gets asked questions. How many sightings did you look at? Well, I can't really go there. It's like, if you can't talk about how many sightings there are, we're not learning anything. We're just learning that there's a bigger and bigger cover up. It's more validated that there's a cover up, but they're still not telling us anything. Whether it's the Senate, whether it's Elizondo or anybody.
But maybe that's actually what they're trying to tell us openly, that there is a cover up. Maybe that's the thing. They're telling us outright.
But are they actually going to come across and tell you, or are they just going to keep this moving the ball down and saying, well, we clearly can't talk about that. We can't talk about this non-disclosure agreement and this sort of stuff, where we already knew this. We knew they had crashed material. There's 2 crashes. Now Valdez come out with a new book with a 45 crash. And the first crash was the Maury Island crash, where it happened 3 days before Kenneth Arnold. The first thing that started was a crash. And so, this has been going on. We've known about crashes.
Do you actually think they're crashes, or some people say they were put down, those ships?
Absolutely. And that's where we've got to go. That's the theory of wow, where you say, oh, they're shooting them down with radar and lightning inside. And like what? They came. I always say, you think that a flying saucer came across the galaxy and then little pieces start falling? I'm going to ask Valet this on Saturday. Let me tell you. And because they always think like we got this piece, and you're looking at the piece and it's got these weird isotopes, and you go, holy cow, we didn't make this thing. And that's the same thing as the UFO sighting. Oh, no, wait, that's not us. And it's just to get you to realize that there's more to the world, or the idea of the crashes. So if you take a look at Bob Bigelow in the recent interview with George Knapp, George says to him, he says, well, what about Roswell? He said, oh, yeah, Roswell happened. Yeah. But he said there was other crashes. There was crashes in the United States. There was a crash in Russia. There was a crash in China. There was a crash in South America. I think they're seeding them. That's what Bob Bigelow says. Bob Bigelow knows a little more than you and I. And then Tyler D calls it the gifting field. When he takes Diane Pasulka and Nolan to the gifting field, they call it. And I actually asked Ryan, did Tyler actually use that term, the gifting field? He said, yeah, I did. And that's the whole idea. This stuff may be given to us, the same as the UFO sightings are, just to give us an impression, to teach us. It's all a game. They're leaking this stuff. The whoever the intelligence is controlling the release of information and elevating our consciousness to realize we're not alone. There's more to the world. Isn't flat. The sun doesn't go around the earth. We're not the center of the universe. Things aren't solid. Consciousness is part of this thing. And there's just gradually filling it in, and that's what I think. So the end result I don't think is as close, but it's the consciousness thing that will save us, and hopefully we get it before we destroy the world, because it's the message to me. The number one message by the beings is the oneness message. Unless you guys get it together and realize you're all one thing, and if you keep fighting like your football teams fighting against each other, and winning is the only thing that matters, you're going to destroy the world. And that's the thing where it's you and I have to get this message across.
Well, that's actually what the guest who couldn't make it tonight, that's her message as a contactee. It's time to transcend. Yeah, Henrietta, yes. Yes.
I just wanted to say, because I've been thinking about Anjali, who was supposed to be here, because I was reading
talk
that,
a little louder.
And sorry. Okay, so when she talks about these messages that she gets, and she says this very key thing, what you might think it is not. That sort of what Barbara Lamb was also talking about when she felt she had made contact with John Mack in the afterlife. it's like we I mean, I know this is very obvious to say, but we really don't know. What you might think it is not. And I also latched on to what she said about these messages say that there's going to be a new form of communication. I mean, that just really interests me. It's like I'm almost like tired of speaking in this way,
Right.
Do you know what I mean? It's like that, right? It's just we're sort of, I mean, this is how we know. It's like lots and lots of words and we're trying to figure it out. But I think going back to Michael Grosso, when he says this kind of collective near-death experience where we just go into a new way of being able to communicate with each other and all these other other dimensional beings.
Well, that's my lecture at Contact in the Desert. I'm doing it, taking off what John Mack said. If we're going to understand this phenomena, we need other ways of knowing. And that gets into understanding quantum physics and the role of consciousness, Grant. So
Alan, messages.
You're breaking up, Steve. You're breaking up.
Things fit into
but anyway, I have one more.
Languages. And the idea of.
No, I couldn't. Can you write something? I could you, but Grant, let's say it all comes out. Let's say, will there be? No, but but is that really going to affect people? I mean, Copernicus said the Earth was not this. It didn't affect the guys farming, the serfs. It is. How much is this really going to change the average person? Because I agree with you. It's the most incredible story of all time, but most people are so asleep. And so what do you think? Yeah.
Well, it depends. What do you mean by change? I mean, if they say turn off the nukes, do you think every nation's going to say, okay, well, we'll agree to that. We're going to turn off all the nuclear weapons because they're very concerned about this. We're going to stop polluting the planet. We're going to stop war. I think people are just going to go on themselves in terms of it's all about profit. It's the end result. It's making a buck. It's me versus you, good versus bad, all this kind of stuff. I'm not sure that that's going to happen right away where that's the key issue is whether we make it through that separation thing.
Well, actually, I want to have you on with Whitley Strieber and Darryl Anka. I'm going to try to set that up, and this will be like a contact program. Okay, Grant, would that be interesting for you?
Darryl Anka, the one is the all are the one.
But that's so simple. There has to be more to it, don't you think? We're not there.
Well, it's a key principle. It's like, right. What you put out comes back, and oneness. And that seems to be the number. 54% of all experiencers say they're talking about oneness. Everybody thinks, they're talking about, whatever, politics, with your government and all this kind of stuff, or religion. They don't talk about religion. They talk about politics. They talk about this oneness concept. And I think that's a key message, which I'm not sure is going to change because we're moving more and more, as I can see it, to a world of rape, pillage, kill, and steal. I mean, the 10 poorest countries in the world are capitalist free enterprise, shitholes where people we got 64 million people wandering the world that are absolutely hated by everybody. Don't come into our country. They own nothing. I mean, we're just going in a real bad direction as far as I can see it with the separation thing where it's about who has the most and it's a materialistic paradigm that has to be broken. Otherwise it's game over.
Well, that's the very reason a lot of people say, who cares about UFOs? Let's take care of the planet and let's stop looking out there. I don't agree with that, but that's a lot of the kind of political agendas. Some of the like environmentalists and all those kind of liberals, Steve, have, right? Not even meeting you.
Yeah, even Sheehan talked about that, where he talked about the power of the aerial school kids. What was the message? The one that Emily Trim got was technology, all these technological images coming in her head. And the last one was this giant explosion. And it said, you have technology, but you could do better. And the girl beside her was getting these rapid image cycling things with the environment. Those are the two main messages that they're getting. And when you get powerful little kids telling those messages, so when that movie comes out, that may shift some people, but it sort of reinforces you and I with the idea. But the average guy who's, making a living and doesn't know anything about UFOs, it's still about, how am I going to make more money? How do I stop paying taxes? All this kind of stuff. People are consumed with this material world, and that's what they're trying to warn us about.
Right. So one more question, and then everyone can have a sort of final question because we've been at this for a while. If you had Elizondo right there in front of you, which you might at some point, what would you ask him? What would you want him to tell you, Grant?
Oh my goodness, I have no idea.
Oh, come on, let's say it's happening. Let's make that happen for you, Grant. Let's visualize it. What comes to mind? Like, what do you want to know? What would you like to know? Well, let's say the government in general. What do you like? You sort of know it. Oh, you've been doing all this research, but what do you want to hear them say? Basically, what? Because, I mean, what comes to mind?
Well, to me, it's always the consciousness thing. The fact that we don't understand that this thing is a lot less physical than people think it is. It's a lot more spiritual than people think it is. It's 1,000 times more complex than people think it is. And it is a hive, which, I mean, is not going to go over well in America when people realize it's like everybody's the message. So they come to you and say, the message is, Alan, everybody's a cell in the human body. And everybody's to do what they're supposed to do. And in the United States of America, that's not a good message today. It's like, don't you dare tell me what to do. I'll do whatever I want. In fact, if you tell me to do it, I'm going to do exactly the opposite. It's this individual. And that's the idea, is that individual, the whole world is moving to individuals fighting against each other like football teams, compared to everybody working together as cells in the human body, bees in a hive, whatever it is. People don't like that concept of the cells, and it's the idea is that when you get 80 trillion cells and then one decides they're going to do their own thing, it's a cancer cell. That's what the situation we're in the world. That's what I would want them to get across, is this message that we've got to do this we've got to stop fighting each other. But it's hard to do because people are so invested in the material thing of making money, and you do that through competition and through capitalism and stuff like that. And I don't know how you turn that around.
Well, that's a conditioning. That making money thing is a brainwashing that we're set to. Yeah, Henrietta, go ahead.
I mean, I'm not sure that the general populace is as materialistic as we say. I mean, I think the powers that be, the big power structures, for sure. I mean, the defense budget being like actually 950 billion, the US defense budget. I mean, but the average person that you're talking about, this, I don't agree that lots of people are asleep and they're just thinking about making money. I think that people are much richer and more multifaceted than that. And
maybe
particularly all over the world. We're just talking about, maybe Americans more so, but I'm from England originally, and traveling the world, a lot in my life. I don't feel that people are as sort of asleep as we're saying, and also if they're having these experiences of seeing, very ordinary people with ordinary lives, if you want to say that, as if they see these kind of great balls of light or spaceships. I was watching a lot of these things today, and it does take you into a different mindset where that we really don't know what's going on, who we are, and I've spoken to a lot of friends who've had those experiences, and it changes their whole trajectory. So maybe, I don't know. I have more hope for the general, that it's us, the people, that actually are much more onto the consciousness, spiritual component that Grant keeps talking about. I just see that the whole government power structure thing is the distraction, but all of us together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's hopefully it's maybe not that bad. I mean, there is a lot of
narrative grab.
Wait, what were you saying? What Grant was going to say something. Go ahead, Grant. Jump in.
No, I would sort of sum it up like this. I mean, it's a reincarnation world. I had this major download. It's a reincarnation world. We all came in here at this particular time, in this particular place, in the middle of whatever mess or heavenly state we find ourselves in. And we chose this. In a reincarnation world, it's all experience. So it's not like we're in a terrible world, and if we get disclosure, then it's going to be a wonderful world and everybody's going to be, in nirvana. It's basically, you dealt the cards, play the cards you're dealt. Why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? And it really doesn't matter if it's good and bad stuff happening to us. If you take the responsibility that we have a part in this and choosing this kind of stuff, we're here for a reason. We're supposed to figure out what we're supposed to do. And it really doesn't matter whether we're poor or rich or whatever. We may have chosen that in a reincarnation world. And it comes down to when you leave, I believe you only get to ask one question: how did it work out? And the whole thing is, we're on a stage and you put the players on the stage and you played the whole thing, and you can't blame Hillary Clinton and the government and Alan and me, and you have to take responsibility for where you are, and realize that we are here to learn, and whatever happens to us, we either learn from it or we don't learn from it.
Right. No, I think that's true. I mean, ultimately, it doesn't matter if there's aliens or not, although I love that line by Terence McKenna who says, what we think is an alien invasion is just there it's in disguise so as not to really alarm us about what's really going on. I don't think we, right?
Actually,
yeah, I don't think we really
Alan,
know
Yeah,
go ahead. Go ahead, Steve.
I have a Terence McKenna quote I've been waiting to say for the last 5 minutes.
Okay, please. I love Terence. Yeah. Yeah, go.
The mystery is in the body. The mystery is in the body and the way the body works itself into nature. What the archaic revival means is shamanism, ecstasy, orgiastic sexuality, and the defeat of the three enemies of the people. And the three enemies of the people are hegemony, monogamy, and monotony. We have to break the monotony. But
All right.
funny you mentioned McKenna.
I think that's what the UFOs do. I think that's why I'm excited about it. And Henrietta, it will break the monotony. I think what Henrietta was also saying, when someone sees a UFO, I mean, the Hurtak say, or Desiree Hurtak says, it changes people. It changed you, Grant. I mean, you were kind of a regular guy, and then boom, 1975. You kind of just go out of curiosity and you're sucked down the rabbit hole. Linkatai at Phoenix, she was a doctor. She saw the Phoenix lights, changed her life for the next 20 years. Maybe when these things show up, we'll get the world of consciousness, who knows, that we're hoping for. And maybe they're just gauging it. Maybe that's what's so panicked about the government. It's like, either you tell them or we tell them. That's sort of like and they're appearing. And this woman, Anjali, said there are 4 different races that are coming here, ready or not, here they come. And so we better get ready. It's one of the messages. We'll have her on at some point. David, you have any final words here from your perspective?
This is my disclosure, right? Like, I think that these conversations and listening to folks like Whitley, you know, I mean, Steve with Oshalon and, you know, his continuous kind of pushing the boundaries, the stuff that Grant's been exploring, Henrietta, the stuff that you've done, Alan, you know, I mean, I think that this is where I'm getting my information from. I'm glad that we had this opportunity, though, for Grant to kind of recap the other stuff. The other stuff is, I find it fascinating, you know, but in terms of the actual phenomena, you know, and I've said this, I think, on a couple different of these video casts, it just, for me, you know, and Grant, as you said earlier, I mean, you know, it's the beings themselves. That's kind of the interesting thing, and us, right, in that relationship. And so that's, you know, that to me is really the meat.
Well, that's what's so exciting, is the beings. Now, who are they? How do they think? What do they know? I mean, that's the fascination. I mean, it gets us out of the mundane of the human drama. Like, how long can we see the same old silly love story in some Hollywood movie or some violent war movie or some, you know, Western? We need a new story. And I think the ETs, whatever's out there, is part of a new story. That's why I say in my book. So, Grant, thank you. Anything you want to leave us with?
I just want to leave you with a quote. Nancy Tremaine, I helped her publish her first book. I wrote the foreword to her second book. She's an experiencer out of Michigan, and I would recommend people read her very complex story, lifelong experiences. She was actually taken before Betty and Barney Hill in July of 1961. Had witnesses. There was a military operation to investigate her case, which is kind of weird because this would be the first sort of major abduction case, and they already knew. The military was there questioning people. And she wrote this down from her sleep, which we were talking about, these sort of noetic downloads that people get. She got this in her sleep. This is basically something that I got, the same thing. And I'll give you one more as soon as it's finished.
What's the name of her book, Grant? What's the name of that book?
and her name.
Shoot. Now you asked me.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Nancy
Hey,
Tremaine. I'll look her up. I never heard of her, but
Yeah,
go ahead.
okay, so here's what she woke up in the morning, and this was written down on her pad. Realities or illusions are part of the delusion that we have created. We are living in a delusional illusion of our making. We are all players in this fictional theater that we perform for our creators, a muse existing for our audience. The stage is set at birth, and our performance has begun. I had a bunch of beings that came to me, these three beings that are claiming that they wanted to talk to me. They wanted me to do a book out of London, England. And they told me I was talking to them in this sort of a trance thing, this woman in trance, and I was talking to these beings. And they said sort of the same sort of thing. They said, we have always been here. You are the visitor. And I just was interviewed by Whitley, and Whitley sort of got the same sort of idea, this whole idea that it may be all here, all now, that the beings are unfolding this thing for us, but we are part of the stage play. That this idea of the world being a sort of a big sort of video game, that it's way more consciousness than we think, and we have a lot more control of our mind as to what we manifest and how the world unfolds. So, and that goes back to this thing where I always said I hated William Shakespeare, and now it appears all the world's a stage, all the men and women and aliens are but actors. They have their entrances and their exits. Each man plays many roles, and we are not the actor on the stage. We are playing an actor on a stage. Big difference.
Right. But it's all a stage, but what's so exciting about the UFO situation, whatever you want to call it, is that it's an unknown, it's unpredictable, it's yet to come into our human field, and that's what excites me. We're at the threshold of a new illusion, probably, but it's a new version of it's an upgraded version. And wait, yeah. See, go ahead.
Say this.
Okay,
one of the big downloads for me, and Dave mentioned the ocean line thing, was that we're on a checkerboard, which has significance. And we're jumping around on this board, and we jump, one square is the elves, one square is the aliens, one square is spirituality. And Ocean said to me, get off the board. Get off the board.
How do you do that, Steve? How do you do that?
Stop playing. You stop playing, and possibly you start working, right?
Well,
working.
The great what do you mean?
The great work.
What do you mean working, though?
There's the great game.
The great work, the alchemists, like get into what exactly. It means to go there. This is what Anjali says. It's time to transcend. What were you going to say, Grant?
Yeah, it goes to this thing. The what's his name? The Eckhart Tolle. The idea of being in the now. That we can get caught up in the future. We're waiting for this to happen, and then I'll get off my ass and do something. But the theory of now says this is the moment. This is the time. Almost like the checkerboard thing. Now you've got to do it. You move ahead. You do what you're supposed to do, and don't worry about. Or even Jesus said, the flowers, they don't work, and the birds don't worry about anything. Why should you worry about the future? Be in the here, be in the now, and realize that you've had a wonderful opportunity to be a part of this universe, and we can get caught up into waiting for something to happen or waiting for a better time where we say, we'll get going once this happened, and we got to be in the here and now and do what we've got to do right now.
Right. No, that sort of does sum it up, and right. Whether they're aliens or elves, it's about now. And this is, I think, we're waking up to something about that. I mean, something's waking up. Yeah, Henrietta, please.
No, well, I just wanted to say, I was thinking about like how it seems to be from all the conversations, including these, and that I'm having with other people, this massive synchronicities that's happening, and, coming into contact with this kind of burning intelligence that's, so much sort of beyond us, but also part of ourselves. It's like, I just find that,
but isn't it exciting, Henrietta? Isn't it really like...
Yeah, and it's happening very, very fast. And then for me personally, in these kind of interesting increments, which are much more rapid and with these sort of synchronicities. I mean, I saw something, I told you this, Alan, but I didn't tell you about it. But I walked out of the house the other night, because it's good to talk about these things, an actual thing. I saw this like orange, red, you know, ball just kind of moving across the sky as I walked out of this house a few nights ago. And I was able to like stand and stare and look at it for quite a long time. And then I looked on the internet afterwards, like, was that a satellite? It just didn't seem to be that. But it gave me this sense of like this vast intelligent power and this sort of the great mystery, the great thing of like where we're going next. But it was on the back of having a 3-hour conversation with one of my oldest friends whose twin brother is currently dying. And he was a very close friend of mine too. And we had this really intense conversation. We were quoting Psalms. We were remembering literature and poetry that he loved. You know, it's this, and then his Catholic faith and, you know, the words of Jesus Christ. And so we'd have this conversation. And I walked out and, you know, there it was, kind of
Beautiful, beautiful.
So
wow.
I just feel like those experiences for me personally take me out of what Grant's been talking about, you know, this, you know, it is a horrible, messy, like situation that we're in. But I mean, those moments give me this power, which isn't mine, you know, it belongs to all of us. I just think there's possibilities for what we can do in the oneness, the shared.
Yeah. But what I like about these conversations
shared consciousness, you know,
but what I like about these conversations, I'm glad Grant joined us today, is that there's a mystery, and maybe the mystery will always be there, but the kind of joy is to talk about the mystery, not to solve the answer, but to somehow realize we're part of the mystery, but not to discard intelligence either. Let's use our intelligence to, as Grant says, move the ball down the field. We may not score a touchdown this time, but it's like where there's movement in thought and understanding. And that's part of the human dilemma, to seek understanding, but maybe seek it in a new way. Like John Mack says, another way of knowing. So I don't know.
Bashar actually brings up another thing that applies to this. Live at your highest your highest excitement, your moment of highest excitement, without any expectation of how it's going to turn out. And that's where we are. That's why we have these exciting conversations.
Yeah.
It's exciting, and you're in this, and that's where you need to be, and that's where you need to stay in the moment and enjoy it and go with it.
That's it. We are making contact, as my book says, with ourselves, with the mystery, with the unknown, with possibility. It's much better than sitting home and drinking beer and watching the baseball game, is talking about this.
And Alan, you always bring back to you know, beings, you know, which we know not yet what we can achieve. And that's why I'm excited myself.
We know not yet.
These strange experiences.
Yeah, I'm so happy you're seeing stuff, Henrietta. That's exciting. Well, you'll have to come to New York so we can watch some stuff. I'll talk to you after, Henrietta. Call me. But thanks, Grant, for spending time. And you know, you are my go-to guy, Grant, on putting the pieces as the next evidence comes through CNN or DeLon or who, you're the guy who said, okay, maybe this piece goes here or that piece goes there. I mean, I really enjoy that. So I'll be in touch, and thank you, David. And Steve.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Henrietta.
Okay. See you soon. Thanks, everyone online. We had a good chat too online. So I appreciate everyone online. And you could always take out a super chat to support this channel.